Hello and welcome to another edition of the Anglo-Italian podcast. You're joined by me, Adam Gipke, as we discuss, will there be any more record-breaking score draws? And more importantly, who's going to break those records? As I introduced, this is going to be an unconventional pod as unfortunately Rory is off ill. Hopefully he'll recover. So get well soon, Rory. And Andy is otherwise engaged. So in this edition, I'll be trying to break down the first group games of the tournament as we conclude today on the fifth day. And we'll be talking about the games that have taken place. I'll speculate on where everyone is, give my opinions as we go along. But before we do so, make sure you subscribe to our social media channels. So on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, or if you're on Instagram or TikTok, follow us at the Anglo-Italian Podcast. And more importantly, on the YouTube channel, make sure you follow us at the Anglo-Italian Podcast. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, give it a like, let us know you're about as well, and share it with your friends and family. We'd really appreciate if you could. So let us start off by talking about Group C and Group D that did play on Tuesday. If you are someone that is more visual and prefers to watch this as well, I'd advise going on to our YouTube channel to watch this particular part of the pod because I'll be sharing my screen, talking about the results and the in-depth analysis as we go along. So let's start by talking about those big games that did take place. And in particular, we are going to talk about Argentina versus Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't think any of us anticipated that this would go the way in terms of result that did take place. I mean, when you think about the first half for Argentina as well, in particular, it seems like it was plain sailing. Messi scores a penalty within the first 10 minutes. Lautaro Martinez has a goal disallowed. And you kind of think at halftime, right, this is going to go the way of Argentina. They're only going to add more goals. And as Rory called out on Monday night's evening pod, when we did the live stream, we just anticipated there to be goals galore. People have put in probably their wage packets on this, expecting Argentina to win quite handsomely. But one of the things, if you look at Havre's kind of halftime team talk, and I implore you, make sure you try and search that video. He talks about the determination, the grit, working for each other. One of the things that haven't or hasn't been really covered about Saudi Arabia is that 3 weeks prior to this World Cup, they got together as a group. They've been having a series of friendlies, trying to work out each other's balances in terms of that squad. And I think what they displayed in the second half probably shocks a lot of commentators, people like myself as well, to a degree, because I think we probably dismissed them and thought they'd be the Saudi Arabia of previous tournaments where they just turn up successfully, but they just do not appear at this World Cup. And they did exactly the opposite. They did fantastically well. And if we talk about the goals from El Shaarawy, who scored pretty much 4 minutes into the match, into second half, should I say, well taken. it was well taken. Where was Christian Romero for this? I mean, the way El Shaarawy kind of put across Martinez goal and put into the corner was fantastic. And you're kind of thinking, okay, this is interesting. This is going to kind of maybe wake up Argentina. But between kind of that defense and midfield, it almost was like they were on the beach. I don't know where they were. There was just no one in that middle of the park. And Saudi Arabia could sniff that there was an opportunity. They really did well. And when that second goal was scored by El Dawsari, that was in not only the close control was that incredible, the way he hit it. I mean, if that was anyone else, if we said that was like an Mbappe, for example, we'd be lauding this moment. But what followed on from that was that grit and determination that Havre and Nard asked for. The players put their bodies on the line. They were tackling. They were making sure they were doing their duties. If you saw towards the kind of last part of injury time in the second half, it was 9 minutes, but I think they played at least 12 minutes due to an injury to one of the Saudi Arabia players. And it's just like, wow, what a performance. If that was a domestic side, you'd be like, this is an incredible performance. And what they displayed in this particular match was just the levels, I suppose, is just proving that, you know, the football has progressed for these nations. And what one credit has to go to Renard, because he's got a reputation of doing this, in particular at AFCON level, where he's managers of these sides, for example, that aren't fancied for maybe progression through the AFCON. And he gets them to the stages through just working as a team. That was clearly displayed. And I think this is the interesting bit, is like what happens with Argentina going forward, because there's huge alarm bells now going forward. At this point, what I'm going to do now is play a clip from Santi Bauza. So if you haven't seen our preview for the World Cup, he interviewed with Rory and gave us his take on Argentina. So luckily, we've got a soundbite from Santi. He's going to now share to you what he thought about that performance.
Well, you can expect a little bit how the reaction was in Argentina. There was this, I feel like, justified belief that this would be a game which they should win comfortably because, well, of course, they hadn't lost for 65 games previously, and they came off in such emphatic fashion by winning these friendlies against, you know, Honduras and Jamaica and the UAE, and that previous game against Italy in January as well. There were some solid reasons to believe that this could happen, but I feel like we were completely caught off guard by the way in which the Saudis set up, and the early days and the early hours. I feel after the defeat, it was somber. It was completely difficult to continue even that day or the day after the defeat. But once that feeling, I feel, sunk a little bit after the in the aftermath of everything. I feel like people now believe that this could probably be a slip, even if it feels like Argentina need to change a few things to head to the second game against Mexico, but there's still 2 games to go. Depending on the results, Argentina are not even, or sure they may even end up first in their group if results go their way. But they still depend on themselves, and they are, they still have time to change whatever needs to be changed, especially when you consider, the players that were not 100% in 100% shape. It's still early. If they had to, get a big blow to their confidence, maybe to their probably to their belief that they can steamroll everyone, this is the right time to get that blow if it ever comes. So there's this general feeling, even if they were shocked, the players, it's still early to change whatever needs to be changed and face that next game against Mexico, and then the other one.
So, as Santi rightly calls out, I think the humiliation of this game will only kind of hurt Argentina a lot more and more determined to make sure they put it right for the next game. And they probably had to look at the other game that took place that evening between Mexico and Poland and kind of were rubbing their hands, maybe more so at Poland. But if we then dive into that match, and obviously with my Polish hat on, I'm going to probably tear one into Poland because I'm that frustrated with it. But let's talk about the game itself. So, in terms of Mexico versus Poland, um, it wasn't a great game. It was an absolutely terrible game. And I think when we've been criticizing the likes of Qatar, I think they probably had better quality than this particular match. So yeah, let's dive into it. Mexico probably may feel a bit aggrieved in terms of they were the only side that looks likely that they wanted to win this match. But that said, they were met by a resolute Polish defence. I think if you think from a tactical point of view, and I'm going to kind of bring kind of the way Poland played in terms of the formation. So pretty much we kind of had to start off with this kind of almost diamond-like formation. But if you look at the likes of Krychowiak, Zielinski, Szymanski, they were pretty much dragged into the middle of the park, and I'm talking more defensively. You had the likes of Klik and Kivo in the middle that were dictating the kind of play, and we were relying on the likes of Cash and Berezhinski on the left-hand side, alongside Zalewski, really, to kind of be the runners, the willing runners. Kaminski, who I was surprised at his inclusion for the Poland national squad, turned up for this particular match. And he was a willing runner at times, but it was very much a hard job for him to kind of make sure that he supported the key man, which was Robert Lewandowski. But if we talk about how Poland did set up, I mean, I don't know what Mikniewicz was trying to achieve here, because we've got a once in a generation player like Robert Lewandowski, but how were we expecting him to score the goals? Now, granted, we did get a penalty and he did miss, but other than that, it was pretty much Lewandowski creating for other players. He was a player that had to kind of drop down deep, do the one touches or turns, for example. He did have an opportunity that he laid off for Kaminski, and unfortunately, I think it was the Mexican left back Gallardo managed to track him back really well. But apart from that, though, I just don't see what the anticipation was. Mikniewicz said to the Polish TV that he was happy with the result, but how can you be happy at that? Like we have this tendency where we turn up at these tournaments having qualified, but then don't turn up at all. This was my fear factor when I did the preview with Rory. Was I just hope that we get out of the group stages. On that performance alone, I don't think we can do it. I mean, there's no way we're going to change our style, but this is the thing that was kind of alluded to by Krychowiak more recently in the Polish press, was that he kind of alluded to the fact that we will have a different setup for each team in this tournament. So I don't know what Poland's going to be like against Saudi Arabia, but I think Saudi Arabia are a bit more technical. They will tear this Polish team apart if we play the way we did against Mexico. And I think when I'm looking at a scouring on supporters on Twitter as well as just social media accounts, they are just not seeing the win for the trees. They cannot see how we're going to get any wins at this tournament, especially the way we're playing at the moment. And a lot of calls for Mikniewicz to already be sacked because they cannot see us beating Saudi Arabia. If it ends up as a draw, I think we go into the last game against Argentina having to need a win. Argentina themselves, depending on the result that they get against Mexico, could be also needing a victory. So based on that alone, I am very fearful about what this Poland team is going to do. Regards Mexico, they were unlucky. I feel like they just needed a bit more quality going into this tournament. They didn't have the best run of form, but I feel like it's going to be telling how they perform against Argentina. Argentina, as I alluded to, are scarred from the first game against Saudi Arabia. They'll be desperate to put it right. I just feel like Argentina have the quality. But that said, that's what I assumed against Saudi Arabia, and it turned out the other way. So let's wait and see. It'll be interesting to see what your thoughts are on this as well. But let's move on. We're going to move on to Group D games. And the first one was Denmark against Tunisia. Hard fought game, it has to be said. I think on the balance of play, probably a deserved draw, point apiece. There wasn't too much quality in terms of goal threats. That said, Denmark, I feel, had their opportunities. In particular, Olsen, for example, tapped in, but he was adjudged to be offside. It was one of those funny games where I think Tunisia proved the point. They actually went in there with the intent of getting something out of the game, and they did fantastically well. The runners were fantastic for them, in particular Mascani, who did have a very good game. But that said, it was all about that kind of centre piece in Tunisia's team, as well as the goalkeeper. Darmen had a fantastic game. Nothing too much to write about this particular game, but I think Denmark will be the most disappointed when it comes to thinking about how they are going to progress out of this group. They would have anticipated to have got 3 points. But if we move on to the evening game, which was France against Australia, now it did look after 10 minutes like there was going to be a bit of a shock on the cards. Goodwin scoring after 9 minutes, and you're kind of thinking, hello, what's going to happen here? But France did turn up. The depth that this team has, the quality they've got, and Mbappe has to be called out for this particular match. He was incredible. He just seemed to have this kind of arrogance that wasn't taking the mick, but was just taking on his players at will. He looks at home when he was on that left-hand side, and the defender, in terms of Atkinson, really did struggle. He didn't have a chance, unfortunately. But that said, I think the whole French team looked really comfortable for this match. As soon as the goals started to flow, in particular, Giroud has to be called out. He was the star man for this particular match. Showed, I think, what people underestimate about his abilities. He's a fantastic target man that scores a lot of goals, important goals, and in this particular match proved his worth in the absence of a certain Benzema. The other point I want to call out, though, is Rabiot. Rabiot is a guy that, hands up, I have been calling out for him to, be dropped from Juventus team. He's proved me wrong this season in particular. I don't think he's a great footballer, but he's just switching it on at the moment. And I wonder what that is. Is it because his contract's due up? But certainly from a Juventus point of view, he's been really building up some really good form at the moment at the right time, especially for France. Fantastic contribution, scored an assist. What more could you ask from him? Fantastic performance. Dembele as well, another one that's having great form for Barcelona at the moment. He seems to have been rejuvenated by Xavi at the moment. Fantastic performance here in particular. I feel like with this French squad, despite the fact that even Lucas Hernandez had to be replaced by his brother Theo for this match, what more can you say about this team? I mean, the depth that they've got, even coming on for the last 15 minutes, the likes of Coleman, for example, when you've got someone that is that kind of quality, that is incredible. So let us move into Wednesday and talk about groups E and F. So let's talk about groups E and F on Wednesday it was. And we'll start off by talking about the early kickoff, which was Morocco versus Croatia. It has to be said on this one, I feel like it was an interesting match, but it seemed to just lack that kind of quality up front. Croatia probably will feel a bit aggrieved that they didn't take at least one of the chances, the one of about 5 or 6 clear-cut chances they had. Even Modric in this match particularly skied over. But that said, Morocco did come back into this match, and Hakimi in particular had a fantastic game on the wings, but also from a free kick position, almost scored. But luckily for Livakovac, who is the Croatian goalkeeper, he managed to punch it away because the ball kind of, like when he took the free kick, kind of swiveled away from him as well at one point. So for him to kind of just make sure that it didn't go in the net was phenomenal for him. But yeah, I think Croatia will kind of rue this one in particular. I mean, Kramaric, for example, had his opportunities in this match. Just I feel like he almost just wasn't maybe selfish. I feel like he works really hard as a player. That's what he's used to when he's in the Bundesliga. But in particular for this match, I think it just lacked someone that was a bit more selfish and that was just a bit more willing to be a wily kind of fox in the box kind of style. And if they had that, I think Croatia would be coming out of this with a 1-0 win at least. Morocco, has to be said, fantastic backline performance from them. They really did well, in particular their goalkeeper, Banu. He had a fantastic game for this. So well-earned point for Morocco in this one. And then we move on to Germany versus Japan. This was another shock. I actually, as you can see by my Japanese shirt, I do rate this Japanese team at the moment. Kamada, for me, is a fantastic midfielder, has been doing phenomenally well over the last 2 seasons for Eintracht Frankfurt. And you saw this in this game. Like, he really was like trying to force the issue at times. Even before Germany had scored, he was really like a focal point for Japan. And they had some fantastic willing runners in this team. Up front, they've got the Celtic striker, Maeda, and he had his chance. Unfortunately, didn't really take it very well. But for me, the likes of Kubo, Ito as well in particular, they really did stand out as players that really did want to take the game to them. From a Germany perspective, it did seem like they'd taken their foot off the boil at times. And this was the interesting point. Like, obviously, what happened? I don't know. What is it a mental thing? I really don't know. They took the lead through a penalty from Gundogan, and then they had a few moments in particular where they could have like extended that lead. But instead, Japan came into it and they fully deserved it. I mean, despite the fact that defensively, there was a few attacks where even the goalkeeper Gonda had fantastic saves. But thinking about the goals, Don and Asano in particular for the last one was incredible, where he came in off the wing and shot into the roof of the net. It was fantastic. And obviously, moments before that, Rudiger kind of mocks the way he'd run, and then he got his just desserts. But luckily, we are blessed that we were also joined by Adam Khan to give us his thoughts on the Germany perspective. If you haven't also seen the preview that he did with Rory on Germany, please do check it out. But I'm going to play out Adam's thoughts from this particular game.
As many German fans fear going into the matchup against Japan, Hansi Flick's side did, of course, lose. It's a match which puts him in a very precarious situation, given that Spain, of course, won 7-0 against Costa Rica. So when Germany faces off against Spain on Sunday, that could really be the deciding fixture to see if they still have a chance of making it to the knockout stages. And yeah, all in all, it was a very disappointing fixture. It had a lot of the same elements that we saw throughout this departure of the 2018 World Cup, where Germany had prolonged spells of possession without ever really threatening. And Japan, with their pace, their precision on the counter, they really hurt this German side. And a defense which has not looked itself without some key leaders like a Matsumo's, for example, suffered from that. And you just look at the second goal they concede, where just about every single player in the back line had a fault at play. Yeah, it's not something that Germany fans will be very hopeful about looking ahead at this Spain side, which, as we mentioned, won 7-0. So, yeah, quite a few worrying signs in the defense. Of course, going forward, there's also some aspects which Germany will not necessarily be too keen on. They had 22 shots in this fixture. At the time of recording, only France had more shots in one of their opening fixtures, 23. And yet, to score just one penalty out of 22 shots is not enough from this German side. And we're seeing once again how a central focal point striker, your Miroslav Klose in 2014, for example, how dearly he is missed in this side, and how perhaps Yusufa Moukoko or Niklas Füllkrug come in against Spain to give that more traditional number 9 presence. But yes, an exciting match that I look forward to on Sunday, and one that will really see Germany tested to the.
So there you go, the thoughts of Adam. Interesting to see kind of, I suppose, the pessimism at the moment with Germany, that they kind of see themselves very similar to the position that they were under Joachim Löw. So for me, it just feels like there's a mentality issue there, but this is almost like a different group of players there as well. So very interesting. But let's kind of go back in terms of fixtures, and we'll talk about the other game in that group, as Adam alluded to, which was Spain 7, Costa Rica 0. I don't know what Costa Rica were doing. I think they opened the barn doors and then just let Keylor Navas kind of have it. I mean, that was an incredible attacking performance by Spain, probably very easy for them in terms of the way they kind of went about their business. I don't think they probably expected this to be as easy. One of the things that I think I overheard, though, with regards to the Costa Rica side, is how old they are. I mean, yeah, they were really hoping that Juice and Burnett, who are highlighted in the preview, would be the kind of outlet, the person that might excite. But he didn't really have a chance in this match. And then you look at the more experienced heads, the likes of Joel Campbell, for example, barely heard from him. Brian Oviedo on left-back duties, again, didn't really hear much from him. So Keylor Navas was very unlucky that he just came across this incredible Spanish team. And a lot of people are comparing the Spanish three in midfields to the Spanish team that won the World Cup. So in the likes of Busquets, Gavi, and obviously Pedri, the full Barcelona effect is taking place here. They've got a good understanding. They know how it works. And you can kind of see it in the way they play. Now, granted, this was a Costa Rica side, so we can't take too much or read too much into this right now. But the fact that they are starting to play together quite well at this early stage is only going to strengthen the way that they carry on in terms of momentum going into the latter stages of this tournament. At the moment, they do look like the favourites. I suspect when you kind of look at how Germany are going to come out of this, they're going to need to put on a performance. And I think Spain will be wary of that. They probably appreciated before these games started taking place that this was going to be a big game for them. Thinking to Costa Rica, I think if they can get out this group with any sort of dignity, it's ensuring that they play a lot better in the next 2 games. But that said, they've obviously got to play Japan in the next game, and then it'll be Germany. I cannot see that happening. I really cannot see that happening. And yeah, it's going to be painful for them. So really painful. And I think they'll be potentially the first team that'll be knocked out at the group stages. We'll then move on to the final group game that took place between Belgium and Canada. My thoughts on this was a very boring game. But that said, Canada were unlucky. They were very unlucky. 90 minutes in, Alphonso Davies gets a penalty and he misses it. Unfortunately, it's saved by the keeper. Bit poor penalty in my eyes, but Courtois did fantastically well. one thing that is definitely evident about this Belgium side is defensively they are very weak. They are very weak in that middle part of the defense. If we remind ourselves who's playing at the moment, so you got Dendoncker, who we know from his Wolves days at the moment, but now currently playing for the likes of Aston Villa. Then you've got Toby Alderweireld and Jan Vertonghen. So obviously quite an aging backline. But the thing that I noticed quite a lot was Axel Witsel. Axel Witsel almost was another centre-back at times. He was the playing, footballing centre-back, but I found that interesting during the course of the game. And I suppose we have to give credit to Batshuayi. What a hit. What an incredible hit. It was a fantastic goal. Thinking about Canada, though, going back to Canada, they had one or two opportunities. Jonathan David had a shot. But overall, like if they were playing rugby, they probably would have scored more points. And this is probably the alarming point from a Canada perspective was they just weren't good enough around the attacking third. They just didn't implement too much penetration. And I think that's probably something that they're going to have to work on. They did, that said, fantastically well in terms of the first 20-minute spell. I thought they were really good, well worth the money. Belgium, I'm very skeptical about how far they'll go in this tournament. But that said, very early stages at this point. So good victory, gets them off the board. Canada, unlucky. But overall, when I was watching this match, I can't say I was really enthralled by this match. So we're going to go into the final group of the tournaments for this first game week, and that's going to be groups G and F, and G and H, sorry, should I say. So I'll join you in a moment. And finally, we move into the final games that did take place. So we'll start off with Thursday's games, and that is Switzerland first taking on Cameroon. So let's dive into the details with this particular match, and we'll look into it together. So Switzerland in this particular match, sole goal by Mbolo, who has really quiet celebrations, it has to be said, for this game. Just due to the fact that his heritage is Cameroonian. It has to be said, his teammates were desperately trying to get him to celebrate for this one. In terms of balance of the game, it has to be said, I felt like it was a tough fought, hard win for Switzerland because Cameroon did offer some opportunities at times, but they did lack that bit of composure, bit of quality in the final third. Switzerland, I think two players to highlight just quickly. Xhaka, I thought he was superb in this particular match, but also Freuler. Freuler was incredible. He's one of the 1,000 players that have joined Nottingham Forest recently. And again, he's proving his worth in this squad. It was also great to see Shedrin Shaqiri, who again was a menace down the kind of sides for Switzerland, causing and creating the opportunity for Mbolo to score as well. So from that point of view, really good. From a Cameroonian point of view, we didn't see the best of Anguissa in this particular match. Really, the only thing that I would say that's probably a positive was that they did try and thread through some balls in. They were quite direct at times. Unfortunately, as I say, just that bit of quality that was eluding them. So, yeah, unfortunate in this match. We'll then move on to the other game, which was Uruguay versus South Korea in Group H. In this particular game, it has to be said, I feel Uruguay will probably be the team that will feel a bit disgruntled. They had the opportunities. They hit the post twice, for example. So Diego Godin, who hit the post from a corner. Well, Valverde, again, taking a shot from distance and missing. The one thing you will say about Uruguay, they have the quality. It was very evident. Darwin Núñez, he seems to have a rush of blood moment where it just seems like he just needs to calm himself down and get some composure before he takes the shot on. And that's probably very kind of relevant to Liverpool fans as well. They could probably concede this a lot more. But that said, I think just looking overall in terms of performance, the backline for South Korea was really strong, really resolute. at times, and they had to be. Marshalled by Kim, the Napoli defender, who we've been raving on our pod. Fantastic, really good performance. From a Uruguay perspective, as I say, probably more disappointed that they didn't get all 3 points in the first game. But that said, I think what they'll do is they'll learn from the things that they didn't get right in this match and probably implement that for the next match. Good performance, though, it has to be said, from Uruguay. I think we saw a lot more than probably a lot of people thought. In particular, me. I thought we weren't going to see too much because of the aging line that they've got in terms of Luis Suarez, Edison Cavani, but they're experienced heads. They're the kind of players that probably will help the others around them, especially when the moments are really critical. Then we move on to the big game that did take place today, which was Portugal 3, Ghana 2. Now, obviously, one man is going to be highlighted in here, and that's the unattached player called Cristiano Ronaldo, scoring in 5 World Cups now. Fantastic performance from him. Granted, it was a penalty that got him that goal, but in that sense as well, defensively, Ghana were all over the shop. Salisu, who conceded this particular penalty for Ronaldo, didn't need to dive in the way he did. Even Daniel Amate, who we know from his Leicester City aspect, not great game for him either. I felt like Ghana had some real good intent, real determination. That was shown by Kudos, who I thought just showed that bit of quality for Ghana. There's one period where he was jinxing past Portuguese players just to hold on to his ball and just bought a foul in. And I think he's a really exciting talent, one that I'd love to see in the Premier League, but what he actually did on the ball was incredible at times for Ghana today. Obviously, the talisman for them is Andre Ayew, and he scored in this match. And I think Ghana probably were a bit unlucky, especially Inaki Williams, last minute of injury time. He decides to do the Dion Dublin step, which is scare the goalkeeper, run when he thinks there's no one behind him. He almost did it. Unfortunately, he slipped up at the wrong moment. For Portugal, though, it has to be said, I felt like attacking-wise, they were really solid, really good in that aspect. And I think that's the one thing you can kind of grasp onto is it seemed like Ronaldo and that element of the business that's happening around him, the circus that is Cristiano Ronaldo, has maybe helped that squad to an extent because there was less like maybe stress and anticipation that they should deliver. They didn't show the kind of nervousness, it has to be said, typified by the performance of Ruben Neves. I thought he had a really good game in this particular match. Bernardo Silva, again, proving what a quality player he is. Bruno Fernandes as well, has to be said. But yeah, you kind of saw the likes of João Felix, for example, Rafael Leao, all having good games. So then we'll move on to the last game that did take place on this Thursday, and that was Brazil versus Serbia. Brazil here running out with a 2-0 victory over the Serbian counterparts. Marko Ivanovic, who did the preview with Rory on Serbia, will probably be consoling himself right now. He predicted before kickoff that it would be a 2-0 victory for Serbia. Unfortunately, on the day, it just feels like they just didn't have enough quality. Richarlison scoring a double here, the second in particular, an overhead kick, which was superb. But the one credit we have to give to Serbia was really battling performance. They really did go out of their way to kind of show that they can do a lot more. They had the grit to kind of come out, but at times they were kind of chasing shadows in the second half. One of the players that I want to highlight was Milinkovic, who we know from his Fiorentina aspect. Very good performance from him. Also Milinkovic-Savic, who's having a phenomenal season with Torino. But it was just the attacking aspect. So Sergej Milinkovic-Savic I was hoping that we'd see a lot more of him. Maybe it isn't the right game for him to kind of make a name for himself. In particular, Lukic as well. Again, we didn't see the best of him in this particular match. And Mitrovic, for all, I suppose, his desire, his fight, didn't get what he wanted for Serbia. But from a Brazil point of view, I think this is the reason why I'm tipping them to win the World Cup. They just seem like they've got the depth, they've got the quality going forward. If you can get Vinicius Jr. on the ball, then that is the key fundamental in terms of making them succeed at this tournament. I think the quality of depth, and they are very scary. There was times against Serbia where you just saw 5 or 6 players kind of running at them at will. And I think that's petrifying for a lot of defenses right now. So that actually brings us to the end of the review for the game. So in the next section, I'm just going to run down through the review of the games that are going to take place before Monday night's live stream. And then I'm going to also talk to you about an interview that we've got lined up for you guys. So hold that thought, make sure you get a cup of tea, and we'll see you on the next part.
Hi, I'm David Wheeler, and you're listening to the Anglo-Italian podcast.
And you join me back to do a preview of the weekend's games in the second round of the World Cup. So let us start by kind of giving you the fixtures that are going to take place, and they start from Friday. So if you're listening to this on Friday, hopefully you're getting in the mood, because we have got to kick us off Wales versus Iran. So big game potentially here for Wales. Can they get 3 points here? Iran will be desperate themselves to prove their worth at this World Cup. A lot of, I suppose, pressure on Carlos Queiroz to see if he can deliver for this Iranian squad. We've also got Qatar versus Senegal. Now, Senegal will be keen here to get a win over Qatar. Qatar obviously trying to build on that defeat against Ecuador. So this will be very interesting. The big games, though, take place later on tomorrow or on Friday. So that is the Netherlands taking on Ecuador. Ecuador is the pod's favourites, and obviously Netherlands got themselves to a good start against Senegal, winning 2-0 in the first game. So very interesting. But I know for a lot of you guys who are listening and those that are watching, the big game for you is going to be England versus USA. I think England are probably licking their lips at this, but there's always going to be a sense of be careful, because this USA squad have the tendency to pull down their pants, don't they? So let's see what happens. Then on Saturday, we have got Tunisia versus Australia. That could be an interesting match because Australia could do with the win here, as will Tunisia. Tunisia, I think, have the better quality, though. So let's not put too many bets on that one. We've then also got at 1 o'clock, Poland versus Saudi Arabia. Poland, as I mentioned earlier on, will be key to trying to ensure that they get some points in this match because, yeah, we mentioned about the fact that Argentina are going to be hurt from that defeat against Saudi Arabia. Later on, we have got some exciting games. France versus Denmark, the big, I think, clash of that particular group in Group D. I think everyone's going to say that these are going to be the two sides that will be first and second place, but let's see how they get on in this particular match. And finally, in this particular match on Saturday, then we've got Argentina versus Mexico. As I mentioned, Argentina will be wanting to put that defeat behind them, but will Mexico mess it up for them? We shall see. We shall see. Then we move into Sunday. We have got Japan versus Costa Rica. I do fancy Japan for this one particularly. We've also got Belgium versus Morocco, Croatia versus Canada, and the big clash that does take place on Sunday, as Adam alluded to earlier, Spain versus Germany. This could be the game that we see Germany dumped out of the competition. Wow. I didn't think we'd be ever saying that this early on. And then on Monday before our live stream, we have got Cameroon versus Serbia. We've got South Korea versus Ghana, Brazil versus Switzerland, and then Portugal versus Uruguay. That match in particular, Portugal-Uruguay, I think has got goals written all over it personally. But yeah, very interesting and entertaining. So at this point, what I'm going to do is now kind of start to hand you over, because I did a fantastic interview with a Wycombe Wanderers player. His name is David Wheeler, and he's very eloquent on all things environmental as well as political. But what we did in this interview was talk about more about his career. So Wycombe Wanderers fans, if you're listening, make sure you get a cup of tea, enjoy this section, and as I introduce you to David Wheeler. And here we are back, and hopefully guys you enjoyed that particular interview with Dave Wheeler. I absolutely enjoyed myself. He's such a great guy, pleasant and very, as you can see by the interview, very eloquent on the subjects of politics as well as environmentalism. So in traditional fashion on the Anglo-Italian podcast with the World Cup editions, we have got a great partnership with the Cards of Qatar. For you guys that have been listening so far, you're in for a treat. We'll be hopefully interviewing those guys shortly for a special edition. But at this point, if you don't know, what we do is just read out the stories of 3 individuals that unfortunately have had their lives taken away in the kind of build up of this World Cup. And we just want to remember them. And I'm going to start by reading about their stories, talking about what happened to them. So if you are someone that gets alarmed very easily, then please just go on mute for a second with this recording. Otherwise, I'm just going to read this now. It shouldn't last more than about 3 minutes, but we've got 3 individuals. So I'm going to start off by talking about Manar Hussein. Manar Hussein died on April 16th, 2020 in Qatar due to an electric shock. He had worked for 3 years for a company as a painter. The 28-year-old widow, Fatima Begum, says that she has now moved in with her dead husband's parents. I'm worried how I can afford to pay for my children's education, she says. The entire family in the Kumilla district of southeastern Bangladesh is now having a difficult time. The official explanation is that it was an accident, but they do not have any further details. The family now gets help from the neighbors to cope with the daily expenses. Next individual is Bishal Rayhan. In February 2020, the family picked up their body of the 20-year-old Bishal Rayhan at the airport. The company did not say anything that he died in a car accident, or beside that he died in a car accident in Qatar's capital Doha on January 27th, 2020. He had only worked in Qatar for 9 months when this happened, says the 47-year-old father, Bipal Rayhan. After receiving the body, Bishal's mother has been paralyzed, and the father is now trying to survive with his disabled wife and 2 children in Bahrab in Kashiganji in central Bangladesh. Finally, the story of Musharraf Hassan. Musharraf Hassan decided to migrate to Qatar to fulfill the dream of lifting the family out of poverty. For 5 years, he worked as a mason at different construction sites, but never got paid on a regular basis. The sudden and untimely death put us, a family of 5, in dire hardship and debt bondage, says Musharraf's widow, Yosanna Begum. Her husband died on August the 8th, 2018 at the age of 38. The official cause of death was cardiac choke, according to his death certificate.